What if tomorrow the power went out? For good. No freezers, no grocery stores, no fresh food. Would your food survive? For the Amish, this is everyday life. They've mastered ingenious ways to keep their harvest fresh for years. In a world where everything collapses, the Amish thrive without electricity. From ash-preserved eggs to smoke-infused cheese, their unconventional methods might hold the key to food security in a world without power. Cold cellar storage. For the Amish, cold cellar storage is a cornerstone of food preservation, offering a simple yet highly effective way to keep fruits, vegetables, and even dairy products fresh for months. By digging underground cellars or utilising existing basements, they take advantage of the Earth's natural coolness to store their harvest. These cellars are insulated by soil, maintaining a consistent temperature and humidity level ideal for crops like potatoes, carrots, onions, and apples. In Amish homes, root cellars are carefully organised. Potatoes are often piled in burlap sacks, while carrots and turnips might be layered in sand to retain their crispness. Apples, which release ethylene gas, are stored separately to prevent them from accelerating the ripening, or spoilage, of other produce. This attention to detail ensures everything stays fresh and edible long into the colder months. The first time I saw an Amish root cellar, I was amazed at its practicality. It felt like stepping into a piece of history, yet it's a system that's still incredibly relevant today. There's something so grounding about storing food this way, literally using the earth itself to preserve the fruits of your labour. While root cellars provide a cool, natural way to store your produce for months, what about preserving those garden-fresh flavours indefinitely? That's where canning steps in. Canning. When it comes to food preservation, canning is one of the Amish community's most essential skills. In their kitchens, you'll often find jars lined up like soldiers on a mission, filled with everything from tomatoes to peaches and even meats. For the Amish, this isn't just a technique, it's a way of life. They use canning to make sure nothing goes to waste and to ensure their families have access to high-quality food year-round. What I love most about this method is how it connects people to their food. I remember trying canning for the first time myself, and honestly, it was a bit overwhelming. But once I got the hang of it, the satisfaction of opening a jar of home-canned peaches months later, still tasting as fresh, was unmatched. The Amish have perfected this craft, and it's one I admire deeply. The Amish approach to canning is both practical and meticulous. They'll harvest fresh produce from their gardens, cook or prepare it in large batches, and seal it in jars using a pressure canner or water bath. This ensures that the food is not only preserved, but safe to eat for months, or even years down the line. What's fascinating is how they rely on simple tools and techniques, passing down the knowledge through generations. There's no shiny, high-tech equipment here, just time-tested traditions. Knowing you can preserve your own food without relying on modern conveniences gives a sense of independence that's rare these days. Canning is a great way to lock in freshness, but sometimes preservation isn't just about storage, it's about flavour. That's where the Amish's mastery of smoking comes into play. Smoking cheese. When it comes to preserving cheese, the Amish take it to the next level with smoking. This method not only imparts a rich, smoky flavour, but also forms a protective outer layer that naturally inhibits bacteria growth. Smoked cheese, especially when stored in wax or vacuum sealed, can last for several months, making it a practical and delicious addition to Amish food storage. I'll admit, the first time I tasted Amish smoked cheese, I was blown away. It wasn't just the flavour that struck me, it was the thoughtfulness behind the process. Knowing that this method also helps extend the cheese's shelf life made it even more impressive. In Amish smokehouses, cheeses like cheddar or Gouda are carefully hung or placed on racks, allowing the smoke from hickory, maple, or applewood to infuse them. The process is slow and deliberate. ensuring every piece absorbs the deep, earthy flavours of the wood. The result is a cheese that's not just preserved, but transformed, perfect for long winters or special family gatherings. The smoky aroma alone is enough to transport you to a simpler, more intentional way of living. The smoky aroma and rich flavour of preserved cheese are unforgettable. But let's shift gears to pickling, a method that preserves food while transforming its flavour. Pickling. The Amish do not joke about pickling, as it's as much an art as it is a science. For the Amish, this method involves submerging food, often cucumbers, beets or green beans, in vinegar or brine infused with spices and herbs. The acidic environment from the vinegar or the saltiness of the brine prevents harmful bacteria and mould from growing, while simultaneously enhancing the food's flavour. What sets the Amish apart in their pickling practice is their use of fresh, homegrown ingredients and traditional recipes passed down through generations. In their pantries, you'll often find rows of glass jars filled with brightly coloured, pickled vegetables. The process starts shortly after harvest, ensuring that the produce is at its peak freshness before being preserved. One thing I find truly inspiring about Amish pickling is how simple it is. A few years ago, I tried pickling for the first time, and I'll admit I was sceptical. Could something so straightforward really work that well? But when I tasted my first batch of homemade pickled carrots, I was hooked. It was a perfect mix of crispness and flavour, and I could imagine how this method could be a lifesaver during winter months. For the Amish, pickling isn't just about preservation, it's about community. Pickling parties, where families come together to process large quantities of produce, are common. It's not only efficient, but also a way to bond. Pickling captures bright and bold flavours, but for a more subtle infusion, the Amish often turn to oil preservation. Oil preservation. Oil preservation is a technique the Amish have quietly mastered. By submerging foods like herbs, vegetables, or even meats in oil, the Amish create an airtight seal that protects against moisture and oxygen, two major culprits in spoilage. The result is food that stays fresh longer while taking on the rich, infused flavours of the oil. In Amish households, this method is often used for preserving garden herbs like basil or rosemary, as well as small cuts of meat or cheeses. Fresh herbs are washed, dried thoroughly, and submerged in jars of oil, often olive or sunflower oil. This not only extends their shelf life, but also creates a ready-to-use, flavourful base for cooking. Meats might be preserved using a confit method, where they're slow-cooked in their own fat or oil and then stored submerged in it. The first time I tried preserving herbs in oil, it felt like I was creating something gourmet out of simple ingredients. A jar of garlic-infused oil not only kept the garlic fresh, but also transformed my cooking. Every drizzle was packed with flavour, and it made me appreciate how preservation can enhance food in ways I hadn't considered before. For the Amish, this method is about making every ingredient count. They waste nothing, and even the oil used for preservation finds new life in cooking. Speaking of transforming food, let's take a look at a preservation technique that not only preserves but enhances nutrients and flavour. Fermentation. Fermentation. Fermentation might sound like a trendy health movement, but for the Amish, it's a time-honoured way to preserve food while also boosting its nutritional value. This method uses beneficial bacteria or yeast to convert sugars and carbohydrates into lactic acid, alcohol, or carbon dioxide. These byproducts naturally preserve the food by creating an environment that harmful microorganisms can't survive in. What I admire most about this method is how it transforms simple ingredients into something extraordinary. I remember the first time I tasted Amish-made sauerkraut. It was tangy, crisp, and unlike anything I'd had before. It made me realize how fermentation isn't just about preservation. It's about creating layers of flavor and nutrition that modern methods simply can't replicate. In Amish kitchens, fermentation is used to make food items like sauerkraut, pickled vegetables, and even sourdough bread starters. The process often begins with a crock or wooden barrel, filled with shredded cabbage or other vegetables, salted, and left to ferment naturally. What's fascinating is how hands-off the process is. The Amish trust nature to do its work, checking periodically to ensure the fermentation is progressing as it should. Fermentation also has incredible health benefits, a fact the Amish have understood long before probiotics became a trend. In a way, it's a preservation method that gives back more than it takes. Fermentation may rely on beneficial bacteria, but what if you could preserve food with something as simple as ashes? That's right. Let's see how the Amish use wood ash to keep eggs and root vegetables fresh for months. Ash storage. Ash storage is one of the most fascinating and resourceful food preservation techniques used by the Amish. By using ash, often from wood-burning stoves, as a preservation medium, they can keep eggs and root vegetables fresh for months without refrigeration. This method works by creating a dry, sterile environment that seals out moisture and bacteria, preventing spoilage. For eggs, the process involves carefully coating each egg in a layer of ash. The ash forms a barrier over the shell, keeping out air and bacteria, which help preserve the egg's freshness for weeks or even months. Root vegetables such as carrots, turnips or beets are packed in layers of ash within crates or barrels. The ash not only prevents moisture loss, but also protects the vegetables from rot or pests. What I love about ash storage is how brilliantly simple it is. The first time I learned about this method, I was struck by how the Amish turn what might seem like waste, ashes from their stoves, into a valuable tool for preservation. It's such an elegant example of their zero-waste philosophy, where nothing goes unused. Ash storage is particularly valuable during the winter months when fresh produce is scarce. For the Amish, it's a practical way to extend the shelf life of their harvests and ensure a steady food supply for their families all year round. Ash storage may seem old-fashioned, but it's as relevant today as ever for anyone looking to embrace simpler, more sustainable living. While ash storage is ideal for extending the life of root vegetables, what about creating fresh greens from dried goods? Sprouting is the Amish's answer. Sprouting. When fresh vegetables are out of season, the Amish turn to sprouting as a reliable source of greens. By soaking grains, beans or seeds and allowing them to germinate, they can create nutrient-rich sprouts that are packed with vitamins and enzymes. This method doesn't just extend the utility of dry goods, it transforms them into fresh, living food. In Amish household, sprouting is often done on a small scale, using simple jars or trays. Seeds like alfalfa, mung beans or wheat are soaked in water, drained, and then left to sprout over a few days. The result is a fresh, crunchy addition to meals, perfect for salads, sandwiches or soups. It's a simple process that provides a big nutritional payoff, especially during the winter months when fresh produce isn't readily available. What I love about sprouting is how accessible it is. The first time I sprouted lentils at home, I was amazed at how easy and rewarding it was. It's like watching nature work its magic right on your kitchen counter. And the best part? It doesn't require any special equipment or refrigeration. For the Amish, sprouting is a practical way to ensure their families have access to fresh greens year-round. Sprouting gives life to seeds, but sometimes the key to preservation is removing moisture entirely, which is why drying is one of the simplest and oldest methods the Amish use to store food for the long haul. Drying. When it comes to drying food, the Amish have truly mastered the art of being simple and resourceful. By removing moisture from fruits, vegetables, herbs, and even meats, the Amish prevent bacteria, molds, and yeasts from causing spoilage. What makes their approach unique is their reliance on natural drying methods like air and sun drying, often eschewing modern food dehydrators unless they are powered by off-grid energy sources. Personally, I've always been fascinated by the Amish approach to drying. There's something so satisfying about seeing food preserved this way. So simple, yet so effective. There's nothing quite like using your own dried basil in a winter soup and realizing it still carries the essence of summer. In Amish communities, you might spot rows of apple slices strung up in kitchens or on porches during the harvest season, drying naturally in the air. Herbs like mint and oregano are hung in bundles, filling their homes with earthy aromas as they dry. Sun-drying is also a common practice, especially for fruits like peaches and tomatoes, which thrive under the warmth of the sun. What I admire most about the Amish method is its accessibility. No fancy equipment, no complicated techniques, just patience and a connection to the natural rhythm of life. And the end result? Lightweight, compact food that's perfect for storage and packed with flavour and nutrition. While drying is perfect for lightweight, long-term storage, there's another way the Amish lock in freshness, by removing air entirely through vacuum sealing. Vacuum sealing. While many Amish communities prefer traditional methods, vacuum sealing has found its way into some households as a practical, modern addition. This technique works by removing air from packaging, creating a vacuum that slows oxidation and spoilage. Without oxygen, bacteria and mold can't thrive, making this an effective way to store fresh, frozen, or dried foods for much longer periods. What's intriguing is how the Amish adapt this technology to their off-grid lifestyle. Many use hand-powered or gas-powered vacuum sealers to package bulk goods like grains, dried fruits, or even smoked meats. The sealed bags are then stored in root cellars or other cool, dark spaces to ensure longevity. Combining vacuum sealing with other traditional methods like salting or drying allows the Amish to extend the shelf life of their food even further. For me, vacuum sealing feels like the perfect bridge between old and new. Watching the Amish use vacuum sealing alongside methods like smoking and fermenting has inspired me to think more creatively about food storage. Vacuum sealing is all about keeping food fresh, but sometimes the secret lies in the preparation, and blanching is that secret. Blanching. Blanching is one of those lesser-known yet highly effective preservation methods that the Amish use to ensure their vegetables stay fresh, colourful, and nutritious. This process involves briefly boiling vegetables and then plunging them into ice water to halt the cooking. For the Amish, blanching is often a preparatory step before freezing or drying vegetables, as it inactivates enzymes that could cause spoilage over time. I personally love how blanching brings out the vibrant colours in vegetables. The first time I blanched green beans, I was amazed. They turned this beautiful, vivid green that made me feel like a pro in the kitchen. In Amish communities, this technique is commonly applied to crops like green beans, corn, and broccoli. Families will harvest their vegetables at peak ripeness and immediately blanch them to lock in their natural flavours and textures. The simplicity of the process aligns perfectly with Amish values, relying on little more than boiling water, ice, and time. For the Amish, blanching is more than just a method, it's a way to maximize the value of their hard-earned harvests. Blanching keeps produce crisp and colorful, but what if you could turn it into something even more versatile? Powdering is the Amish's way of transforming foods into lightweight ingredients that last for years. Powdering. Powdering is one of the most efficient food preservation methods used by the Amish, turning perishable ingredients like eggs, milk, or even vegetables into lightweight powders. The process begins with drying the food completely, often using a dehydrator or air drying technique, before grinding it into a fine powder. These powders are then stored in airtight containers, ready to be rehydrated or used as is in recipes. This method is particularly practical for the Amish, who rely on powdered milk or eggs to supplement fresh supplies during winter or when cooking for large families. Powdered vegetables, like carrots or onions, are often used to add flavour and nutrition to soups and stews, making them a versatile addition to any pantry. Don't we all just love the idea of powdered food because of how much space it saves? The first time I made powdered tomato for a soup mix, I was surprised at how easy it was to store and use later. Seeing how the Amish incorporate this technique into their everyday lives has inspired me to rethink how I preserve my own food. Powdering is a perfect example of how the Amish maximize every resource, and it's something we could all benefit from adopting. Powdering is ideal for storing compactly. But what about bulkier items like potatoes and apples? That's where root cellars shine. Root cellaring. Few methods of food preservation are as timeless and natural as root cellaring. For the Amish, a root cellar is not just a storage space. It's a lifeline that allows them to keep their harvest fresh through the cold months without the need for electricity. By utilizing the cool, humid environment underground, they can store hardy crops like potatoes, carrots, and apples for months on end. When I first visited an Amish root cellar, I was struck by how simple and effective it was. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing your food is stored naturally, without any reliance on modern technology. In Amish homes, root cellars are carefully designed to maintain a consistent temperature and humidity level, often insulated with straw or lined with stone. Families organize their cellars meticulously, placing different types of produce in specific areas to ensure optimal storage. Apples, for instance, are kept separate from potatoes to prevent the gases they release from affecting each other's quality. Root cellaring by the Amish community reminds us that sometimes the most sustainable solutions are the ones that have been around the longest. While root cellars protect fresh produce, what about foods that need an airtight barrier? Wax sealing provides a protective layer for cheese and fruit, preserving their quality for months. Wax sealing. Wax sealing is a preservation method that's both practical and elegant, and the Amish have perfected its use for preserving cheese and certain fruits. By dipping foods in melted wax, they create a barrier that protects against air, moisture, and bacteria. This simple step extends the shelf life of items like hard cheeses for months, keeping them fresh and flavorful. In Amish communities, wax sealing is often done by hand, using beeswax or paraffin wax. Blocks of homemade cheese are carefully coated, sometimes multiple times, to ensure a complete seal. This process not only prevents spoilage, but also locks in the cheese's flavor and texture. Similarly, fruits like pears can be wax sealed to extend their freshness, a technique that's as effective as it is visually stunning. Personally, I find wax sealing fascinating because it combines artistry with functionality. Watching the wax harden into a smooth, protective layer felt like wrapping the cheese in a custom-made shield. For the Amish, this method is a reflection of their resourcefulness. It's a technique that proves you don't need modern technology to achieve remarkable results. Wax sealing locks out air, but ever heard of pickling in alcohol? It takes it a step further. Pickling in alcohol. Pickling in alcohol might seem like an unexpected preservation method, but it's one the Amish sometimes use for fruits or vegetables. By immersing foods in alcohol, typically brandy or a strong spirit, they create an environment that prevents spoilage, while also imparting a unique, rich flavour. For me, pickling in alcohol feels like a bit of a luxury preservation method. The first time I tried alcohol-preserved cherries, I was blown away by the flavour it added to the cherries. It's not something I'd use every day, but seeing how the Amish incorporate this into their traditions makes it feel all the more special. In Amish communities, this method is most often used for preserving all kinds of fruits. The alcohol acts as both a preservative and a flavour enhancer, resulting in a product that's as delightful to eat as it is practical to store. These preserved items are often used as toppings for desserts or as special treats during festive occasions. For the Amish, even rare methods like this reflect their balance of practicality and creativity, turning preserved foods into memorable culinary experiences. Pickling in alcohol enhances flavour with richness, but for a completely different taste experience, let's turn to smoking. Smoking. There's something magical about the Amish smoking process. It's not just about preservation, it's an art form. Smoking involves exposing food to the smoke of burning wood, which not only keeps spoilage at bay, but also infuses it with rich, smoky flavours. The Amish often pair smoking with curing, creating meats and fish that can last for months without refrigeration. In Amish communities, smoking is done in small smokehouses built behind their homes. Different woods like hickory, maple, or apple wood are chosen carefully to achieve specific flavours. It's not uncommon to see freshly smoked hams or fish hanging in these smokehouses, ready to feed a family through the colder months. What's incredible is how much care they put into every step, from curing the meat to controlling the smoke. Personally, the smell of smoked food is an instant comfort. The first time I tasted Amish-style smoked meat, it was a revelation, very rich and savoury. What I love most is how this method connects you to the food in such an intimate way. Smoking isn't a quick process, and that's what makes it special. The Amish maximise every piece of meat, ensuring nothing goes to waste. And as someone who's tried smoking my own meat at home, I can tell you, it's as rewarding as it is delicious. Smoking preserves food with flavour, but the Amish also use a lesser-known technique that's just as fascinating: lye preservation. Lye preservation. Lye preservation may sound unconventional, but it's a method rooted in practicality and ingenuity. By soaking certain foods, like fish or specific vegetables, in a lye solution, the Amish can extend their shelf life significantly. This process breaks down the food structure in a controlled way, allowing it to absorb moisture and remain preserved for longer periods. I'll admit, the idea of using lye initially felt intimidating, but when I saw it in action, I was amazed at the precision and care involved. It's a method that requires patience and respect for the process, which is something the Amish have in abundance. One example of this method is lutefisk, a dish traditionally made by soaking dried fish in a lye solution before rinsing and cooking. While this technique is not as commonly practiced in Amish households as other methods, it's occasionally used for preserving fish, especially when preparing for long winters or community events where large quantities of food need to be stored efficiently. Lye preservation shows the Amish's bold approach to food storage, but they also understand the practical value of modern science. Chemical preservatives offer another way to ensure food stays safe and long-lasting. Chemical preservation. While chemical preservatives may not seem like the most Amish method, they do have their place in some Amish communities, particularly for curing meats and extending the shelf life of certain foods. Using natural or minimal chemical additives like saltpeter, a nitrate, or citric acid, the Amish carefully balance tradition with practicality. When it comes to meat preservation, nitrates and nitrites play a key role in curing sausage or ham, keeping it safe from bacterial growth while enhancing flavour. What sets the Amish apart is their preference for simplicity and natural alternatives whenever possible. They'll often combine chemical preservatives with time-tested methods like salting or smoking, creating foods that last for months without refrigeration. I've always found this balance between old and new fascinating. While many of us might shy away from chemical preservatives, seeing how the Amish use them sparingly and responsibly has given me a new perspective. Chemical preservation may seem advanced, but sometimes the simplest methods are the most effective. Freezing, whether through natural ice or off-grid ingenuity, is another Amish preservation method. Freezing. Now, this one might surprise you. The Amish use freezing too. It might seem modern, but it's a method they've adapted to fit their lifestyles. While most of us rely on electric freezers, the Amish get creative. Some communities use gas-powered freezers, while others rely on ice houses. Yes, actual ice blocks to keep things cold. They freeze meats, vegetables, and even baked goods, often in bulk, to make sure they're ready for the long winters. Here's the thing about freezing. It's not the easiest method for the Amish, because many of them avoid electricity. Yet, they've found ways to make it work. For example, during the winter months, they'll freeze large amounts of meat using natural outdoor temperatures. When it's colder than your freezer outside, why not take advantage of it? It's this kind of ingenuity that really blows me away. Personally, I've always loved the convenience of freezing food. I mean, who doesn't? But seeing how the Amish approach it, using ingenuity to work around their limited technology, made me realize just how resourceful they are. One family I met even shared how they'd freeze homemade pies and casseroles for big family gatherings. What I've also noticed is that the Amish are careful not to waste what they freeze. They're experts at portioning and rotating their stock, so nothing goes bad. I can't lie, I've been guilty of letting things get freezer burn or forgetting what's in the back of my freezer. But the Amish, they treat every item as valuable, and that mindset has inspired me to do the same. Freezing keeps food fresh by lowering temperatures, but what if you could cool food without electricity at all? Clay pot cooling is an ancient, low-tech method the Amish use to keep perishables fresh and cool. Clay pot cooling, Zeopot. Clay pot cooling might sound ancient, and it is, but the Amish use it as a practical, eco-friendly way to preserve perishables like milk, butter, and vegetables, without refrigeration. The system is simple. A smaller clay pot is placed inside a larger one filled with wet sand. As the water in the sand evaporates, it cools the inner pot, keeping its contents fresh for days or even weeks. I have to admit, the ingenuity of clay pot cooling blew me away when I first learned about it. It's such a low-tech solution, yet it works so well. I tried it myself during a summer camping trip, and it was amazing how well it kept our food fresh. It made me appreciate just how clever and resourceful the Amish are in their approach to food preservation. For the Amish, this technique is especially useful during warmer months or for households without access to a cold cellar. Butter stays firm, milk remains drinkable, and leafy greens avoid wilting, all without a single watt of electricity. What's remarkable is how effective this method is, relying solely on natural processes like evaporation and insulation. It's a technique that aligns perfectly with the Amish philosophy of living simply and sustainably. Clay pot cooling is brilliant for short-term freshness, but when it comes to long-term survival, the Amish rely on pemmican. Pemmican making. Pemmican is the ultimate survival food, and the Amish have kept this ancient technique alive with their own twist. Made by combining dried meat with rendered animal fat, sometimes mixed with dried berries, pemmican is an incredibly nutrient-dense and long-lasting food. It's designed for emergencies, long winters, or periods when fresh food is scarce. The Amish prepare pemmican by first drying the meat, often beef or venison, until it's completely moisture-free. They then grind it into a powder and mix it with melted fat to create a dense, calorie-rich block. Sometimes they'll add dried fruits like blueberries for extra flavour and nutrients. Once formed, the pemmican is stored in airtight containers where it can last for months or even years, without refrigeration. I find the concept of pemmican fascinating, especially its simplicity. The idea that something so basic, meat, fat and fruit, can sustain you through tough times is inspiring. I tried making pemmican once, and while it wasn't the prettiest thing I've ever created, it felt good to know I had something reliable and shelf-stable on hand. Pemmican is all about combining ingredients for longevity, but what if you could preserve food with just a single, essential element: salting? Salting. If you want to talk about preserving food the old-fashioned way, salting is as traditional as it gets. The Amish use salting to preserve meats like pork and fish, relying on its natural ability to draw out moisture and inhibit bacterial growth. In Amish households, you'll often find slabs of salted pork or fish stored in cool, dry spaces. Salt acts as a preservative by dehydrating the food and creating an environment where bacteria can't thrive. But beyond preservation, the process adds a unique depth of flavour, which makes salted meats like bacon and ham staples in Amish kitchens. What struck me most about salting is how transformative salt can be, not just as a flavour enhancer, but as a powerful preservative. Salting may be one of the oldest and simplest ways to preserve food, but sometimes preservation can be a little sweeter. Let's see how the Amish use sugar preservation, not just to keep food fresh, but to transform it into something delightful and long-lasting. Sugar preservation. Sugar preservation is one of the Amish community's most delightful methods for extending the shelf life of their harvests. This technique involves using sugar to draw moisture out of fruits and other foods, creating an environment that bacteria and mold can't survive in. From jams and jellies to syrups, sugar not only serves as a preservative, but also enhances the natural sweetness of the food. I remember making my first batch of peach jam after a trip to an Amish market. As I sealed the jars, I felt an incredible sense of accomplishment. Opening 1 month later was like reliving that sunny summer day all over again. For the Amish, sugar preservation is a practical way to enjoy the fruits of their labour long after the harvest season has ended. In their kitchens, you'll often find bubbling pots of fruit preserves being carefully stirred over wood-burning stoves. They use simple ingredients like fresh-picked strawberries, a bit of lemon juice, and sugar to create jars of jam that can last for months, if not years, without refrigeration. While sugar preservation locks in sweetness and flavour, pasteurisation offers the Amish community something entirely different. Safety. Pasteurisation. Pasteurisation might sound like a modern innovation, but what a lot of people don't know is that some Amish families have been using this method to ensure the safety of milk, juices, and other perishables for centuries. This process involves heating food or liquid to a specific temperature for a set time to kill harmful bacteria without compromising its taste or nutrition. In Amish communities, pasteurisation is often done manually, using simple equipment to process raw milk or homemade cider. This step ensures that their products are safe to consume while maintaining the freshness and quality they're known for. For example, freshly squeezed apple cider is often pasteurised in large batches before being stored in cool cellars, ready for enjoyment throughout the year. Seeing how they pasteurise milk on a wood-fired setup was eye-opening for me. Pasteurisation has revolutionised food safety worldwide, but for the Amish, it's just another example of how they balance tradition with practicality. It's one more way they show that food preservation can be both simple and effective. Pasteurisation protects food by eliminating harmful bacteria, but what about enhancing flavour while preserving? That's where brining shines. Brining. Brining is another preservation technique the Amish have mastered, and it's as flavourful as it is functional. This method involves soaking food in a saltwater solution to draw out moisture and create an inhospitable environment for bacteria. Whether it's pork, fish, or even vegetables, brining ensures that these foods stay fresh longer while also enhancing their taste and texture. For me, brining feels like a mix of science and tradition. The first time I tried brining a turkey for Thanksgiving, I was amazed at how juicy and flavourful it turned out. Knowing the Amish have been using this technique for generations makes me appreciate it even more. In Amish households, brining often begins with freshly butchered meats or garden vegetables. Pork is a particular favourite, with hams and bacon soaking in brine barrels before being smoked or cured. This not only preserves the meat, but also infuses it with a rich, savoury flavour. Vegetables like cucumbers or green beans are brined as the first step in pickling, adding another layer of preservation. Brining is more than just a preservation method. It's a way to elevate the food itself. The Amish have shown me that sometimes the simplest methods, like salt and water, can create the most incredible results. Brining is the perfect blend of preservation and taste, showcasing the Amish's skill in making every ingredient count. Whether it's a Thanksgiving turkey or a simple vegetable pickle, their methods remind us that food preservation is more than a skill. It's a way of life, and as we've seen, their techniques are as relevant today as they've ever been, offering lessons in being sustainable and self-reliant.